Up with you on ESPN starting right now. Delighted to be back. It's better than ever. Maria is back with us. Maria, roar, Greedy.
Oh, wow.
Roar. You see the Tigers?
That's how we're starting.
You see the Tigers? That's how we start the show.
That's how we're starting the show.
You see how we starting the show? Real life Tigers. For the second consecutive day, LSU was well represented in our studio, and last night they were represented right at the top of the latest college football playoff rankings. They're out last night, and as expected, LSU is the new number 1. Ohio State falls to 2 after a 59-point win. Clemson moves up to 3. Alabama falls down to 5. Not a huge surprise, while it's Georgia that slides into that number 1 spot. We take a look here again. It's LSU in completely unfamiliar territory. The Tigers occupying the top spot for the very first time. They're now the only SEC team not named Alabama to reach the top of the rankings. Ohio State destroyed Maryland last week, still fell to number 2. It's the first time the number 1 team fell from the top spot after a win since these rankings began. Minnesota, meanwhile, is a team to watch. They jumped 9 spots. That's the largest jump into the top 10 in the college football playoff era, and tied for the second largest week-to-week jump overall. And so, as I mentioned, I have phenomenal college football insight with me at this desk, but I will give you the honor of the first words. As you watched those last night, what were the first thoughts that came to your mind?
I see the setup happening, Greeny. I see them. They throwing Alabama to alley-oop. They're going to put them right at 5. Oh, such and such lost. Georgia didn't play very well in the SEC championship. Let's put them at 4. Oh, who's number 1? LSU. I've seen this story before. In 2012, I was begging the world, make sure Oklahoma State gets in. Oklahoma State won their conference. Alabama doesn't deserve it. It was the game of the century. Let it sit there. Now we have the game of the decade, and now you're going to try to put Alabama and sneak them in there, and everybody's going to be like, because they deserve it, and they actually do, because you know why? Every time you put them in there, when people don't think they're supposed to be there, they stink and win it. I don't want to play them again. We did what we had to do. We went to Tuscaloosa and we won it. Let us live. Let us have our shine. Go Tigers.
Maria, what do you think?
You know what I love, Greeny? It's like we have all of this wealth of college football knowledge. We'll start with the LSU fan. How do you feel? My biggest takeaway was that for Alabama, they can't do anything to get into this playoff right now. They have to sit back and wait and see if someone loses. Yeah. That means they're rooting for Auburn. Sorry, Alabama fans. You're going to want Auburn to beat Georgia. Or you're making sure that Georgia doesn't win an SEC championship game, because I think they're boxed out at that point, because you can't keep LSU out.
Yeah, Alabama needs some help, and you know, you hit on the good point. Auburn may help them more than they think. I think Auburn can actually beat Georgia this week. When you look at Georgia, last week they played Missouri. They lost 3 offensive linemen. I'm not sure if they're going to play. They haven't released their injury reports yet, but 3 offensive linemen went out, and you're talking about one of the best D-lines in all of college football with Marlon Davidson and Derek Brown. Man, these guys are hungry. Davidson has 5 sacks on the season, and Brown has 4, and they're great at pressuring the quarterback and getting to the backfield. The only saving grace for Georgia, Paul, just might be that they have a great defense themselves, and they're playing against a freshman quarterback in Bo Nix.
Yeah, I think what it really means is if it ends and we're in debate, Nick Saban last time around came on game day. He called in SVP. This time he's going to elevate his game. He's going to go on Kimmel. He'll have nothing to do that weekend.
The path is not that complicated, though, right? I understand what you're saying, Maria. They can't do anything about it. Yeah. But as they just sort of sit back and watch,
wait.
It's not that complicated. If Georgia gets knocked out, then it's going to be a question of the committee putting one of these other teams ahead of them.
I think this is a time when we're going to find out, how does the committee really feel about conference championships?
Absolutely.
Are you going to be able to keep one-loss Big 12 or Pac-12 champions out of the conversation if Alabama doesn't win a title but is a one-loss team?
Well, the problem is this is not the Supreme Court, so there's no precedent. People come in and off that committee.
Right.
I think what people are failing to think about, though, is the Pac-12. They're sitting out there. I had written them off. And now they're alive, and I'm not really sure why they're alive, but Utah and Oregon need each other, and it's worth remembering. August 31st, Oregon lost to guess who?
Auburn.
Yeah.
And I think
Last play of the game.
the huge part about this as well is, and I think Greeny made it last week, they don't have rules. There is no precedent. They get to do what they want to do, and they can explain it away in any way that they want to. And so if they feel like Alabama is one of the top 4 teams and that gives them the best college football playoff, that's what they're going to do.
And oh, by the way, from now on, if I'm an AD or I'm a coach, I'm like, schedule me somebody.
You
Put
have to.
somebody on my schedule
Right.
because right now the committee just told us that big wins or top marquee wins matter more than a bad loss. That's what I got out of it.
Well, let's see if that's the way it winds up, because the other part of this is being unbeaten is a lot better than having one loss at this point. Very quickly, you made a point, and you've made it repeatedly, and I think it's worth mentioning as far as the Pac-12 is concerned and the makeup of the committee.
Listen, this is not personal about Rob Mullins. He's the chairman of the committee. I wouldn't want to be chairman of that committee and have to be dragged in front of the cameras every week and say nothing. But what happens if it's Oregon and Alabama, say, for that final spot? And Rob Mullins, he said last night on the show, well, I step out of the room. But he's still the chairman. He has great influence. And I think there is going to be a hue and cry that we have never seen before here, because this is not a transparent committee. They never tell us who they voted for. They never really tell us anything.
To be clear, he is the athletic director at Oregon.
Yeah,
We're not aware. That's important. I'd like to finish this conversation with one team that is not getting mentioned nearly enough in all of this, and you guys will be there this weekend.
Yeah.
The most important metric in all of this on this great sheet that I love is the strength of record, okay? Just how good is your record? Right now, please put the top 4 teams. Okay, we don't have the graphic made yet. I'm told we'll have it in a second. But it should come as no surprise. And the strength of record, LSU is number 1 in the country right now.
Right.
Ohio State is number 2. At number 3 in the country right now is Baylor.
Yes.
Wow. Baylor has the 3rd best strength of record. Who are they playing this weekend, guys?
Oklahoma.
So that's going up. That's getting even better. You cannot leave Baylor out of this conversation. Somehow the committee has them 13.
But that shows you, Greeny, that it's not about this paper. To you, this is the most important paper in America. But to them, it's about what they say with inside those 4 walls and what they see with their eyes. And they don't respect Baylor. Baylor coming into the year wasn't one of the blue bloods. It wasn't one of these teams near the top, and that's why they sit
and
at
the
13.
same with Minnesota. If you look at Minnesota, they get a win over a number 4, the 4th best team in the nation, and they don't move into the top 10.
I don't even know how they conclude this strength of schedules, though. How do you get strength of record? Like a Baylor, you look at their record, and we look at their schedule. It's not like a strong schedule they've played.
I can't explain it necessarily, but I can tell you,
no one
I
can.
can read
no
it.
one can, right.
And right now, according to the metrics, Baylor deserves to be rated a lot higher than they are. And if they beat Oklahoma this weekend, they will definitely be a part of this conversation. Obviously, there's a lot to get to here, and we will continue to. But right now, how about them Cowboys? Let's go to the NFL. The Dallas Cowboys coming off a tough loss to the Vikings on Sunday night. And as always seems to be the case after a Dallas loss, questions again popping up about the job security of their coach, Jason Garrett. Jerry Jones, not right now, ready to overreact.
I don't know that I have too many weeks regarding the Cowboys that I'm not disturbed. Usually the one that gets the most blame and gets the most credit for the loss, if you will, to be clever with my own structure, is the coach. Then you probably got the offensive coordinator, and I'm not trying to be trite, and then you've got the quarterback. And those guys usually are the ones that get it on the head the most.
That's my new favorite quote. That has replaced Lamar Jackson saying, "What move?" Is Jerry saying, there's not too many weeks that I'm not disturbed. Right now, as the president of Jason Garrett and Dak Prescott's fan club, Dominique Foxworth, with whom are we disturbed?
I may be relinquishing my post as president of the Jason Garrett fan club, but I am staying on this Dak Prescott fan club. I grabbed up all the Dak Prescott stock at the beginning of the season when everyone's jumping off the bandwagon, and right now I'm getting rich because he's having an MVP caliber season. If it weren't for the way that this defense is playing, speaking of Jerry Jones, you need to be looking at the defensive side of the ball, who you should be blaming. That defense is failing them, and Dak Prescott is playing amazing.
But a year ago on this show, when the world was ready to fire Jason Garrett, you were ready to die on his hill. Are you still?
He's dying.
I am slowly dying on that hill. He makes a lot of suspect decisions. I think you could explain away the decisions, the in-game decisions this week by saying, well, it's just a couple of yards. Your big running back and your big offensive line should be able to get that. But the problem is there's a series of really bad decisions. It's hard to still defend him. But the reason why I think he works is not because he's a great coach. It's because Jerry Jones is a big big personality, and he has been the only person, the
you
only
know,
coach to fit into that situation.
I feel like we can't always focus on just Jason Garrett when it goes to coaching. A lot of what head coaches do is delegate. And at the beginning of the season, when this team played very well offensively through the first 3 games, it was Kellen Moore, Kellen Moore, Kellen Moore. And when we came into the year, it was Chris Richard is going to be a guy that's going to get all these head coaching interviews at the end of this season. These guys are also failing to do their job when the defense comes in and they're supposed to be one of the top and they don't play well. Offensively, when you go back a few weeks ago and you lose to the Jets because you have a series of 4 downs where you can't convert a first down because you've given the ball to Ezekiel Elliott and Dak Prescott has passed for 380 and you choose to give it to Zeke. You don't have to justify the $90 million by your play call. You justify the $90 million by wins. Yeah. And this coaching staff has failed this team as a whole, not just Jason Garrett.
So Dan Graziano, our insider here, I feel like almost every other week I'm asking you the question and you're giving me the same answer, right? There's nothing going to happen with Jason Garrett right now.
Change suits and shirts. Yeah, otherwise it would just look like we're rerunning stuff. No, he gets the season. Everything I've been told from the Cowboys all year, absolutely no chance of an in-season coaching change. Obviously, they'll evaluate this at the end of the year. If they fall apart and miss the playoffs, it's very difficult to imagine Jason Garrett returning as the Cowboys head coach. If they make a playoff run and give Jerry Jones reason to keep him, again, this is the priority. Jerry Jones would like to succeed with Jason Garrett as the head coach. That's his top choice. Of course, if they don't succeed, the Eagles pass and they fall apart, miss the playoffs, I think all bets are probably off.
But they're a good team. They're not a bad team. They are outgaining their opponents by more than 100 yards. There are only 2 other teams that can say they're doing that. That's the Patriots and the 49ers. The problem is they're not coming up with the wins at the end of the game, and that always falls on the head coach.
Well, which means to me, I sort of feel like you're making the opposite argument of what you think you're making or what it sounds like you're making, which is to say they're less than the sum of their parts, right?
Yeah.
They have better players than their record. They play better than they wind up winning and losing, and that does come down to coaching.
No, I think in part it comes down to coaching, in part it comes down to bad breaks, some of those things, but over the course of a long career, which Jason Garrett has, too many times it's come up bad for him. And I think at the end of the day, whether it's your fault or not, sometimes the buck stops with you when you're the head coach. And I understand what you're saying about the coordinators. They deserve blame too, but the head coach is the head coach.
No, absolutely. I believe that